I didn't expect to still be figuring my life out at 35, but here I am, waking up in the back room of a garage that smells like grease, rust, and half-spilled coffee. I didn't plan to live like this, but I didn't plan to get kicked in the gut by life either. My name's Nathan Cole, born and raised in Southern Colorado, divorced at 29, laid off at 34. No degree, no big dreams, just calloused hands and a mind that knows engines better than it knows people. I used to work at a truck service chain off Interstate 70, 10 years straight. No drama, no write-ups. Then one morning, my manager called me in and said the new owners wanted a younger, more tech-savvy team. Just like that, I was gone. No severance, just a brochure for retraining and a pat on the back that felt more like a push out the door. I moved into my cousin's camper behind her house until I could figure something out. Her name's Brittany. She's 2 years younger than me, but talks like she invented electricity. Business degree, real estate license, Instagram quotes about manifesting greatness. And she made it very clear that letting me park there was charity. At every family event, she'd remind someone, usually loudly, how some people just aren't built for the modern economy. When I got laid off, no one in my family really reached out. No, how are you holding up? No, need anything? Except for my Uncle Ben. He owned this old repair shop out in the sticks, had it since the 80s. Barely turned a profit anymore, but it was his whole life. He said, "Come down, give me a hand. I'll throw you a few bucks, at least you'll keep busy." So I did. The place was falling apart. Dust an inch thick on the front desk. Tools missing. One overhead light flickering like a bad horror movie. But it felt real. Felt earned. I'd spend 10 hours a day under the hood of pickup trucks for ranchers who paid in cash and stories. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel useless. But Brittany had other ideas. At Grandma's funeral, while we were standing by the casket, she leaned in close and whispered, "Still playing with wrenches, huh? You do realize this isn't 1995 anymore?" Then she smiled sweetly, turned to Aunt June and said, "Nathan's just keeping busy helping Uncle Ben with his little shop. It's good he has something to do." Something to do. Like my life was just a series of hobbies to pass the time between failures. I said nothing. Just kept my hands folded and stared at the coffin. But inside something cracked. Not anger exactly. Not yet. Just a slow, deep awareness that to them, I had stopped counting. I was background noise. 2 weeks later, Uncle Ben had a stroke. I found him on the shop floor, clutching his arm, trying to crawl toward the phone. I rode in the ambulance with him, held his hand. Heard him try to speak, but only get out a few broken words. At the hospital, the doctor said the stroke wasn't massive, but it would change things. Recovery would be slow. No more lifting engines. No more 12-hour shifts. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You keep it running. Promise me." I promised. 3 days later, Brittany showed up with coffee and an attitude. Sat in the hospital room, crossed her legs like she was closing a deal. "Ben," she said, "I talked to a guy in town who might be interested in buying the property. With your condition, maybe it's time to think long-term." He looked at her like she'd spat on his boots. "It's not property," he said slowly. "It's my shop." She didn't flinch. "I just think it's time to be realistic." And then she turned to me like I was just another tool in the shed and said, "I mean, Nathan's not really running it, right? He's just helping out." That was the moment. Right there. I didn't say a word, but something inside me clicked like a locked gear finding its teeth. That night, I drove back to the garage alone. I sat on the cold concrete floor surrounded by bolts and broken parts, and I made a decision. If they thought I was just helping out, they had no idea what was coming. Because that shop, it wasn't dying. It was about to rise. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of Uncle Ben's garage, the kind of dark where even the dust feels heavy, with the heater wheezing in the background and my coat still zipped halfway. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brittany's smirk. That corporate smile with nothing behind it but numbers and leverage. She didn't care about the shop. Hell, she didn't even know what a torque wrench looked like. But she saw land. She saw a broken old man in a hospital bed and a tired nephew who couldn't afford to fight back. She saw weakness. What she didn't see, what none of them saw, was that I'd already started rebuilding that place long before Uncle Ben got sick. I'd been fixing more than engines. I'd been listening. Every customer that limped in with a busted axle or a blown radiator brought more than just a problem. They brought stories. Laid-off ranchers, divorced dads, veterans no one hired. I didn't judge. I just worked. Then one guy came in. Mid-40s, rough voice, calloused hands. Drove a '99 Ram that sounded like a dying animal. Said he didn't have the money, but if I let him work alongside me, he'd learn and fix it himself. His name was Jesse. I said sure. Turns out Jesse had done 5 years inside for some dumb mistake in his 20s. Couldn't get a job anywhere. He showed up the next day at 6 a.m. sharp. Didn't ask for a handout. Just asked for a second chance. He didn't leave after that. Then Jesse brought in 2 more guys from his halfway house. Then a kid named Marco from the shelter, barely 19, who could tear down a carburetor in 20 minutes but had no GED. Before I knew it, the shop became something else. It became needed. I didn't plan a program. I didn't call it anything. I just showed up, handed them tools, and said, "Let's fix this." But while the shop was growing into something real, Brittany was circling like a vulture. She came by once a week after Uncle Ben's stroke. Not to help. Not to ask how he was doing. Just to check the property lines. Kept asking if we'd consider offers. Kept talking like this was a business deal. Like I was squatter's dust she couldn't quite sweep away. The worst part? My own family didn't stand up for me. Aunt June told me, "Maybe it's time to let go, Nathan. You've been working so hard for so little." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "Little?" I was teaching guys how to rebuild both engines and their lives. But I didn't say it. Because people like Brittany and Aunt June only heard impact if it came with a press release. Then it got worse. One morning, I came into the shop to find a bright yellow notice stapled to the front door. Zoning violation, unauthorized use of property for instructional purposes. My stomach dropped. I hadn't registered anything formal. I didn't think I had to. We weren't a school. We were just fixing things. But someone had made a call, filed a complaint, asked the city to look closer. There was only one person who'd benefit from shutting us down. Brittany. I found her that night at Uncle Ben's house, sitting in his chair like it already belonged to her, sipping tea she didn't make. "You called the city?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She looked up, blinked innocently. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "But if the shop closes," I said, "you get to sell the land uncontested. That's what this is about, right?" She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Nathan, this is grown-up business. Maybe it's time you accepted what you are. A mechanic, not a savior." Then she leaned back and said the line that cut deeper than any socket wrench ever could. "Uncle Ben's legacy isn't in that dusty old shop. It's in knowing when to move on. You should try it." I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Drove back to the shop. My hands were shaking. But on the counter next to the register was a handwritten thank you note from Marco's sister. Said he'd stayed sober 6 months, got his GED, wanted to start applying to trade schools. He said you gave him a reason to try. I stared at that note for a long time. The zoning notice was still pinned to the door. But that night, I made another decision. If they wanted to call the city, then fine. Let's go legal. Because if they thought I was just patching up cars to kill time, they were about to watch me turn this shop into something they couldn't bulldoze. There's a special kind of humiliation that only happens around a dinner table. The kind where everyone smiles with their teeth but slices you open with their silence. It was Christmas at my Aunt June's. The kind of holiday where everything's too shiny, too perfect. Brittany had just finished bragging about her fiancé's newest investment property when the conversation shifted to me. Or rather, around me. "So, Nathan?" Uncle Dale asked. "You still fixing up that old place? Or did it finally fall apart?" Laughter. Not cruel, just lazy. That's worse somehow. At least cruelty means you matter. This felt like background noise. Like I wasn't even worth insulting properly. I smiled, nodded. Still working, still running. Then Brittany leaned in, topped off her wine, and said, "It's sweet. Like a hobby with a mission. Like a garage daycare." More laughter. Even my own mother gave a little chuckle, like she didn't want to be the only one not in on the joke. I looked down at my plate. The mashed potatoes blurred. I could feel the heat crawl up the back of my neck, the tight drumbeat in my chest. I thought about Jesse, about Marco, about the 3 guys who just passed their emissions certifications thanks to the hours they put in at my shop. Thought about the kid who cried when he rebuilt his first engine, because no one had ever taught him anything before. And here I was, being talked about like I was playing pretend in the backyard with tools I didn't understand. But I didn't say anything, because that's what you do when you're the disappointment in the family. You stay polite. You stay small. You don't make scenes. Not yet. A week later, back at the shop, I got a call from a local paper. Some lifestyle writer had heard about our little rehab through repair project through a church volunteer. Asked if they could stop by, maybe take some photos. I almost said no, but Jesse said, "Why not? Maybe it's time someone else saw what we're building here." So they came, took some shots, asked questions, talked to the guys. I didn't think much of it. Until it ran. Front page, title, "From Rust to Redemption, One Garage's Unlikely Road to Saving Lives." It exploded. Emails, calls, messages from strangers saying they'd donate parts, tools, their time. A retired shop teacher sent a crate of textbooks. A therapist offered to do free sessions for any of the guys. Someone even sent a check. No name, just a sticky note. "Keep going." It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying. And Brittany? She didn't say a word, until 2 weeks later. She showed up at the shop. Heels on gravel, sunglasses on indoors. The whole boss woman thing. Walked around like she was inspecting inventory. "This is impressive," she said, lips tight. "Didn't expect you to actually get press." I didn't reply. She walked over to the workbench, tapped the article I'd pinned to the corkboard. "But you might want to be careful. Zoning's one thing, but now you've got attention. And attention brings questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked. She smiled. That tight, condescending smile I'd known since childhood. Like what kind of insurance you have. Or permits. Or if any of these guys have criminal records that could be problematic. There it was. The threat. Wrapped in fake concern. I said nothing. Just looked at her. Not with hate, just clarity. She wasn't scared of what I was doing. She was scared people were watching me do it. That night, I got home to find an envelope wedged in my door. No return address. Inside was a copy of a complaint. Filed with the city under my name. Allegations of improper waste disposal. Potential hazardous materials. Request for immediate inspection. Filed by Nathan Cole. Someone had impersonated me, forged my signature, and submitted it with a burner email. I sat down, hands shaking. I'd seen sabotage before. But this was warfare. And the worst part? It worked. The city called the next morning, said they'd be out for inspection Monday. If they found anything, the shop would be shut down until further notice. That gave me 4 days. 4 days to clean, fix, find proof, prepare everything. 4 days to stop Brittany from burying the one place that finally felt like mine. But the twist? I wouldn't be fighting alone. Because later that same day, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. "Hey, my brother Marco said you changed his life. I work for the county DA's office. I saw something on the complaint that didn't add up. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I felt like the tide had turned. The morning of the inspection, I woke up on the concrete floor of the shop. Again. My neck ached. My back was wrecked. But my mind? Sharper than it had been in years. In the 3 days since I got that forged complaint, I hadn't stopped moving. I pulled every oil barrel out of the back room, labeled every container, cleaned the drains with bleach and vinegar. Had Jesse scrubbed the windows while Marco rewired the backlight over the entry? Because presentation matters when a city official shows up with a clipboard and a motive. But the most important thing I did? I called the number in the email from the DA's office. Her name was Lena. Her brother? Marco. The same Marco Brittany once joked would probably end up in jail again. Turns out he didn't. He ended up with a steady job, a clean record, and a sister who believed in him. Lena told me the complaint form had inconsistencies. Wrong ID number, incorrect phrasing, even a signature mismatch. She couldn't file anything officially without proof, but she said, "If you can hold them off long enough, I might be able to give you something stronger than bleach and hope." I did my best. So when the inspector showed up, a man in khakis with a clipboard and a tired sigh, I greeted him with fresh coffee and a binder full of records. Receipts, waste disposal logs, inventory. All legit, all dated, all clean. He walked the shop, checked the drains, took photos, didn't smile once. At the end, he said, "Looks like you're running a tight operation, Mr. Cole. You'll hear from us next week." No fines, no shutdown. But I knew it wasn't over. That night, Brittany called me, straight to the point. "You had a visitor today." I did. Thought for sure they'd find something. "Yeah," I said. "So did you." She didn't deny it, just paused. "You're making this harder than it has to be. And you're making this uglier than it ever needed to be." There was silence. Then she said, "Nathan, you're not going to win." That's when I laughed. Not bitter, just tired. "Britt, I'm not trying to win. I'm just not losing on my knees." I hung up. 2 days later, Lena called me back. Her voice was low, urgent. "I can't tell you how I got this, but the IP address tied to the forged complaint, it matches a residential address in Aurora." I didn't speak. She continued, "Guess who renewed a business license from that same IP 3 days prior?" I already knew. "Brittany Maxwell," she said. "Her condo, her Wi-Fi, her mistake." That's when it hit me. She'd filed it from home. She thought no one would trace it. Thought I didn't have the reach or the resources. She underestimated 2 things. 1, the kind of people I had in my corner now. 2, and what happens when you corner someone who's got nothing left to lose. But I didn't take the file to the city yet. I waited, because something else arrived first. A letter, certified, from Brittany's lawyer. Intent to purchase the shop property on behalf of an interested development party. A polite way of saying, sell now or be buried later. But the twist? They thought I didn't own it. They didn't know what I'd done the week after Uncle Ben's stroke. I'd called his lawyer, asked for the power of attorney. We got it notarized while Ben was still lucid. He signed over the deed to the business, not the land, not the building, but the entity. Coal and Sun Restoration. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept the documents in a drawer under the register. So I made a copy, slid it into a manila envelope, along with Lena's digital report. Then I drove to Brittany's office downtown. 5th floor, big glass walls, fake succulents. Her receptionist tried to stop me. I didn't stop walking. When Brittany looked up, her expression froze. I placed the envelope on her desk, leaned in, and said quietly, "You didn't just try to ruin my life. You committed a felony, and you were sloppy." She opened the file. Her eyes moved fast, then slower. Color drained from her face. I didn't wait. Just turned to leave and added, "Next time you want to play dirty, try not using your own Wi-Fi." And then I walked out. Calm. Steady. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight. My stomach didn't feel like gravel. I didn't need to win. I just needed her to know she'd lost. What I didn't expect was what I found waiting at the shop that night. Uncle Ben, sitting on a folding chair in the bay, holding a newspaper with my name on it. "You finally stood up," he said. "Took you long enough." I laughed. Then he handed me a key. "What's this?" I asked. He looked at me, dead serious. "The land." The day of the Small Business Impact Summit, I didn't plan on speaking. I was invited as a guest. Some local recognition for community engagement. One of those polite nods they give to people who don't wear suits to work, but somehow manage to matter anyway. But the night before the event, I got a call from the organizers. Their keynote speaker, some bigwig investor, had dropped out last minute. They'd read the article. They'd seen the city council thread. And they asked me, to take the slot. I almost said no. Then they told me who was on the panel that would follow me. Brittany. She wasn't listed as Brittany Maxwell, though. No, she was up there as Strategic Development Advisor, Urban Uplift Project. Fancy name for the same real estate schemes she'd always pulled. Just polished and nonprofit washed for public money. So I said yes. The next morning, I wore my cleanest boots, a crisp button-up, and that old shop logo cap Uncle Ben gave me years ago. Walked into the Hyatt ballroom like I belonged there. Because finally I did. The room was packed. Cameras, reporters, city reps, investors. They called my name and I walked onto the stage. I didn't start with a joke. I didn't quote anybody. I told the story. The shop. The layoff. The guys who came with nothing but grit and second chances. The day we got our first grant. The night I found a forged complaint with my name on it. People got quiet. Then I talked about what community really means. Not a buzzword, not a checkbox for funding, but a place where people are allowed to rebuild without shame. I saw heads nod. I saw eyes glassy. And I ended with this. You can fake a title, fake concern, even fake paperwork, but you can't fake impact. You either show up or you don't. And the people who needed help, they knew who did. The applause hit like thunder. I stepped off stage and passed the panel table. Brittany sat at the end, legs crossed, face frozen in a perfect smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her turn was next. The moderator began reading her bio aloud, but paused halfway through. There appears to be an update from the city records, a recent investigation into a zoning violation complaint submitted under falsified identity has led to the temporary suspension of several applications tied to Ms. Maxwell's name pending legal review. Gasps. One reporter stood up. Can you comment on the forgery charge, Ms. Maxwell? She didn't move, didn't speak, just blinked. Slowly, like someone waking up inside a nightmare they thought they'd written for someone else. She didn't finish the panel. She left before they cleared the mics. By the end of the week, word got around that her latest funding proposal had been pulled. The Urban Uplift Project? On hold indefinitely. The county had opened a formal review into prior deals. Uncle Ben and I watched it unfold from the shop office. He didn't say much, just poured us both coffee and muttered, "Ain't karma. It's just consequences." I nodded. For once, I didn't need revenge to be loud. It was better this way. Quiet, public, inevitable. A few weeks later, I was back under the hood with Jesse when we heard a knock. It was Marco's sister, Lena. She brought a framed copy of the article. Said the DA's office passed a motion to officially recognize Cole & Son as a certified second-chance employer. No red carpet, no parade. Just validation that couldn't be stolen or forged. And here's the thing I learned. Not all battles need fire. Some just need you to stay standing long enough for the truth to do its job. I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I just kept showing up. And in the end, that was enough. If any part of this story hit home for you, if you've ever been talked down to, underestimated, or written off, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. We've all got our own battles, and sometimes just knowing someone else made it through changes everything. Thanks for sticking with me. If you felt something reading this and want to hear more stories like mine, stories that don't always scream but still cut deep, go ahead and hit subscribe. We're just getting started.